Jack Hues was a guest on my show. We had a wonderful time, and we've struck up a friendship since then. And now, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Nick. Nick is getting to know his microphone, and both of the gentlemen have quite a long working relationship with William Friedkin,
yes.
Which began with, I believe, a phone call at a friend's place.
Yeah, so the kind of history is that Wang Chung had been signed to Geffen Records in Los Angeles, and we'd done an album which had Dancehall Days on it, which is a song that maybe you've come across.
And of course, it's seen in the fabulous strip club scene,
yeah,
which is a good indication of Robbie Mueller's cinematography.
Yeah, yeah. And so we were essentially struggling at the time to write a second album. We'd done a few songs, but the producer and the record company were not happy with what we were doing. I thought it was great, but then you do when you're writing it.
We don't hear any hits. It's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So in this sort of malaise, I was visiting a friend of mine, and in those days, obviously no mobile phones and stuff, and I was chatting to him in his apartment in Bloomsbury, well actually, and his phone rang, and he picked up the phone and said, "Oh, it's for you," which was really strange, because I was in the habit of frequenting his place. And this voice, a lady's voice said, "Will you be free in half an hour to speak to Mr. William Friedkin?" And I sort of vaguely recognised the name, but so I said, "Yes, I will be." So Tim went off and did some teaching. So I was sitting in his apartment on my own, and the phone rang in the half an hour, and William Friedkin was on the other end of the phone, and he was basically said that he was working on a movie called To Live and Die in LA, that he was using a song of ours from this first Geffen album, a song called Wait, which is the track that ends the movie. And he said that he was, basically every day they would sort of look at the rushes from the day's shooting, and he was using Wait as a sort of the music that was playing, and he said this really just captures the mood of exactly what I want, and I want you to write the soundtrack, I want more music like this. In fact, I remember him saying, I want you to take your band into the studio, give me an hour of music.
Didn't he say, I want you guys to go and jam?
Yeah, something like that.
Which is interesting, given that at the time it was two
Exactly.
guys programming a lot of stuff.
Exactly. He seemed to think Wang Chung was this sort of, like his idea of a band, at least 5 people. And of course it's me, Nick, and a drum machine.
I mean, I think he wanted us to be spontaneous, really, and just, which was really exciting for us, because the previous album that we'd been doing, the Points on the Curve, which had Wait and Dancehall Days, was our sort of pop album, and we'd spent months and months and months recording that, sort of being absolutely rigorously meticulous about every beat and every sound, and it was so to be given this kind of brief of being spontaneous, to send him just 45 minutes of music was kind of, and also no songs as well. He didn't want any songs.
Yeah. So it was the one firm rule, right? Sorry, it was the one firm rule. No theme song.
No songs, yeah. So it was literally the opposite of the sort of pressure we've been having from the record company to come up with our next hit. So it was really, really, sort of, what's the word, like a palate cleanser for us, and a really exciting kind of proposition. And also to do not only no songs, but to kind of have that kind of intense, dark, kind of gritty approach was kind of really, really inspiring for us.
And also, you had not seen one frame of footage when you made the music.
No, so I just had a conversation with him, and I talked to Nick about it, and he was like, yeah, it sort of sounds good. I guess there was a call with our management. Geffen at the time didn't want us to do it. They were, in those days, bands doing movie soundtracks was sort of not unheard of. Well, I guess it sort of was.
It's pretty unusual.
Very rare.
And this was Friedkin choosing.
Yes.
Right,
That's the
before
thing. It's
you
like we
came
weren't
through,
touting for business in LA trying to get movie soundtracks. It literally came out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just, sometimes you might get a song in a movie or something like that, but this wasn't that. This was to do the score of the whole movie. So that was very unusual for a pop band to do.
And what was Geffen's initial reaction to that? Because you were in the middle of making what would become the next record.
Yeah, so they wanted pop bands have #1 top 40 hits. They don't do movie soundtracks. And I don't think Geffen had a soundtrack division or anything. You know, in America, the music business is very formatted. You know, everybody deals with their particular thing, and so you know, it's like that you're a pop group or a rock group or whatever it's supposed to be. So you're supposed to be writing hits, not writing movie soundtracks. But eventually, David, our manager, persuaded them to give us a week to do it, which is basically how long we took to do that. Everything pretty much that you hear, apart from the title track, and wait, you know.
Do you think that the week pressure, which is a different kind of a pressure,
Yeah.
as the album pressure, freed you up as well because you were working within a constraint?
It was really liberating
Yeah.
to sort of just go in and just go for it instead of having to think too hard about it. And then, yes,
So I remember the first day, we decided to rent a whole load of percussion instruments, and so like a big sort of gong thing, tam tam, and lots of metal percussion, and just sample all these different sounds. And I remember sort of doing that, and about halfway through thinking like, why am I wasting time doing this?
Fiddly drum work, you must have lost your mind a couple of
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
The synclavier on the previous
Yeah.
record. Is that what you used on this album as
Not
well?
really, actually, no.
Okay.
We just used a lid drum.
Mhm.
The bass synth is a thing called an Oscar, which there's a software version of it now, of course. But it was just a little mono synth that the engineer, David Motion, was the engineer. He had that. And we just made it with that, really. There was no
We used to-
elaborate stuff.
we used Jupiter Array. A lot of the 80s kind of
Yeah.
sort of synthy stuff.
But we didn't get into like a Fairlight. We'd used a lot to do
Yeah.
the CMI Fairlight to do Points in the Curve, the album before, which was incredibly time-consuming to use and sounded like shit.
But it had a light pen, so that's fun.
That's
for
right.
everyone.
But no, Friedkin just absolutely was blown away by what we did, you know. So we had this very kind of a really good creative and dynamic and spontaneous spirit in the studio, which again, as I say, it was not what we've been used to being like, you know. But we're still obviously our pop records were constructed sort of meticulously, layer by layer. So, you know, because we're not really a band, we weren't a band with loads of members, so we had to sort of construct this as well. But we managed to do it in this very quick and dynamic way. So I think that the spirit of that music, Friedkin really responded to, you know, and sort of ended up, you know, actually cutting some of the film to the music that we sent him, which was extraordinary for us.
And also, this film, I found out recently through, I think, someone on the stage, was actually financed by William Friedkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Billy was in complete control of the project, which is amazing. Because I've done a little bit of work on other Hollywood kind of projects, you know, done something for HBO and stuff. And the number of people that are like, you know, there's somebody who has the idea to use Wang Chung or me, you know, and then all these other people, a bit like the car chasing, all these other people show up, do you know what I mean, who want something else, and, you know, it all gets very complicated. Whereas with Billy, he knew what he wanted. He did that great thing that sort of producer-type people do, which is to get the person you want and then give them complete freedom to do what they do best, and then to love it.
Right, there's scenes on, like behind-the-scenes footage of during the car chase, him coming up with new ideas about, for instance, going over the train tracks, which you think, oh, wouldn't that have been in the script? But no, it looks like he would do that on that day. What was his? What was it first like when you first were in the same room as Billy, as he is called?
Hang on, I can call him Billy. I can call him Billy.
Yeah.
We went to in LA. He'd obviously laid the film into the music into the film, and invited us over to Los Angeles to his sound studio, Todd A.O. You know, which is obviously absolutely amazing quality, highest tech of the time. You know.
And pardon, is that the video? Is that the studio we see in the video for Living in LA?
I think it is, yeah.
Is okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was just a mind-blowing experience for us to just be in that place, but then to see and hear and our music in this film sitting with William Friedkin. It was kind of a pretty amazing experience, and it looked amazing, sounded amazing. So we were completely blown away. And then, well, later when it was released, he was so into the whole thing. we made a promo, for became our next single, To Live and Die in LA, the song. And he offered to actually direct our little promo video that was released. So, we did it all in Todd AO. It was such an honour to be working with him, to be directed by Billy Friedkin. That was pretty amazing as well.
He was a sort of larger than life character in many ways,
Mm.
And I remember being in Todd AO, we sort of watched this initial. Well, it's the first time we'd seen the music and the movie together. When we were working on the movie, he'd had sent us over some stuff, because in those days there's no internet, obviously, so everything, it took like a week for stuff to arrive via FedEx from LA,
Mm.
and halfway through this stuff arrived and Nick took a look at it and he sort of said, yeah, it looks really good, do you want to see it? And I was like, no. We're just gonna start second guessing if we look at it, So that experience in Todd AO, the first time seeing it, so it was like a rough cut that we saw, and so Billy went off, and I think you went off and did something, Nick, and I went up to the two sound guys who were sort of mixing everything, and one of the guys looked at me and went, Billy's a piece of work, right? And he goes, oh, he seems he's like really nice to us. And he just looked at me.
Isn't there also a moment where...
He has this reputation for giving people hell, basically. But he was always incredibly nice to us.
And it's continued to be.
Yeah.
He's
He became...
become a really good friend.
Mm-hmm. The two of you have stayed in touch
Yeah.
through the years, and then you did work on The Guardian.
That's
right.
right.
You did score The Guardian.
Yeah, which was, again, I think I'm the only composer that's worked for him twice.
Oh.
It's something about the kill rate on composers. I think maybe there was somebody working on this movie before we did it, like a more conventional Hollywood guy, but he just, again, Billy is it sounds pretentious maybe to say he's an artist, but he sort of knew what he wanted, and it was unconventional what he wanted, and he put his trust in a couple of English idiots, he didn't know what we were going to show up with, and I think it was pretty much against the, they were like right down the line with mixing the film and stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But
It's
then, as I
amazing.
said, I think he did, the last time we did this, Billy was actually here, wasn't he? And he was then very generously saying, I cut the movie to the music, which is not strictly true, I don't think. But there are sections, I think, where he lets the film kind of run on to let the music run on, And I think that gives the movie a very interesting pacing. It's not like the music is, so much music now is scored to the film, which runs at the pace of the narrative,
Mm.
Whereas this, especially in the early sections, there's these quite impressionistic sections where it's just like visual stuff happening, the music playing, there's no real plot evolution. And I think that was where he was sort of had this, the time I spent with him, he was always talking about European movies, and he had that, there's so much in his blood, that approach to making movies.
Although, even though he hadn't initially wanted any songs, when we did send him some songs, he loved them and put them in the movie. And the opening scene, which has the song "To Live and Die in LA," I think he actually shot, especially having received that song, which he hadn't asked for.
Right.
He then shot that whole sequence because he loved the song so much.
And the prelude, actually, with the terrorist.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Because the story with that was, without being too boring about it,
We're doing a Q&A about a Friedkin film, I think.
Yeah.
Go for it.
so we had this experience of going to LA, seeing the movie, and loved it, and we sort of came back, and at that stage it was simply that we'd done the soundtrack and that was it, and I just had this sense of like, we've got to make something of this because it's so amazing, and the song "To Live and Die in LA" just kind of came out. I didn't try and disappoint him. And I played it to Nick, and he was like, yeah, this is good, we should demo this. So we worked on it together, and sent the demo over to Friedkin, thinking he'd be like, no, that's okay, but, I'm happy with what I got. And he was like, no, I'll shoot a whole new sequence at the beginning of the film. And this is amazing, we're going to use it. And that enabled us to sort of start thinking about To Live and Die in LA being our next album as well, because there was a sort of proper focus for it. And at that point, Geffen really got on board with it.
Mhm. And then other songs like "Wake Up, Stop Dreaming," we hear sparingly in the film, and
Yeah.
that's primarily because I'm guessing that was written long after you had done the main body of the soundtrack.
Yeah, but the initial work, which is the instrumental side of the record, we did in that first week that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, well,
it's just later on we then we did to 9LA the song, and then those other songs followed after that.
Sure, which is interesting though, because it all sounds like a piece.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
well. I just when I was reading about it, I thought, oh, he just said no theme song, but they wrote these other songs. And Wake Up So Dreaming is actually one of my favorite of your tunes.
It's quite surprising. I haven't seen it for so long. This film, I was quite surprised how much that song was in the movie actually.
Right, in the mirror scene, and then the train scene. Yeah.
I mean, I was quite surprised by quite a lot of things actually.
Yes, tell us your reaction to that. When was the last time you watched the picture?
God. Even when we were here last time with Billy Friedkin and Mark Coleman, I don't think we watched the film then, did we? I think we went out for dinner and came back and did the Q&A. So I don't think I've seen it for 10 years or so, something like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know about you.
I think I've seen it more recently because I did buy a copy of it on Blu-ray when it came out because Billy was saying it was a good, mastering of the whole thing. That the music sounded really good, which it does on the Blu-ray version.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds amazing in the print as well.
Yeah.
Even though it got cut off at the end still.
Yeah.
Then I was going to see if anyone had some questions, but yes, the Arrow Blu-ray, if anyone has not picked that up. There's a great interview with them and a whole bunch of other special features. And any other thoughts about the movie at the moment, having not seen it in a while, even thematically?
We were both sort of whispering to each other, as it was going by. It was like, well, there's more music in it than we remember doing.
Oh, that reminds me of something I forgot to mention before. The fact that you came up with the music completely independent of even the script, I think, is almost bizarre to think about now because the music is so much a character of the film, or a piece of the character. It moves everything right along. You're not considering about the different narratives or why they're different narratives. You're just moved along from place to place by the music.
I think, again, that's because of Friedkin's sort of the feeling it gave him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really was quite inspiring for him, clearly, the way he sort of integrated it into the film and in some points, actually cut the film to it. So I think that's why it fits in so seamlessly and is such a part of the whole piece.
And did you find that this whole process then freed you up to work on the next phase of the album?
It did. Yeah. Yeah, we were then back to the grindstone of writing.
We're happy about it though?
Yeah, it was refreshing. To do this was an amazing experience. And I think certainly I was a lot more philosophical about the game that had to be played, and we certainly played it.
Was any of that influenced by the way that he saw Friedkin play the game of his profession?
To a degree, yeah. I mean, I think he was very impressive in the way that he was, as you said a little while ago, he financed this movie and was in complete control of his world. And I think that's how he sort of operated really after the big movies he did, The Exorcist and The French Connection. And I think he had this, I remember him talking to me about the experience of doing The Sorcerer, which I think is going to be shown here.
Yes, it is going to be shown here on the 23rd, I think, but check your calendars, of course, and book now.
Yeah, which is really worth seeing, And he was just talking about how, The French Connection was this huge hit. He told me all sorts of very funny stories about that, how that evolved, which probably haven't got time for here. And then The Exorcist, of course, and so both movies won him an Oscar, I think, didn't they? So he was kind of like the hottest director in Hollywood. And then he had this experience of, the next movie he wanted to do was Sorcerer, which was a remake of The Wages of Fear. And everyone was kind of like, well, that's already a great film, why would you remake it? And he was like, no, I'm going to do it, and then told me all these stories about what a disaster it was. Basically, in terms of actually the logistics of making it,
Shooting in the jungle in Ecuador and then having to shoot in a different jungle because the rain that the jungle was known for stopped during the time that they were filming, so they went and built another set in another jungle, and then same thing happened at the end of Return. The stories go on and on. Check out the Blu-ray for Sorcerer.
Absolutely. There's a famous scene where this truck's going over a sort of rickety road bridge. and there was this roaring torrent.
Right, that's right.
It was a trickle when they woke up in the morning to film it, you know, and they ended up having to use models and stuff. But anyway, I say all this because I think when he was doing To Live and Die Early, there was a degree of humility about the way he was approaching it, but also very kind of artisan, if that's the right word. So when I look at those car chases and stuff, those stunt guys were mates of his, really, you know. And Bud Smith, I remember, who was the editor, you know, was a mate of his. And Bob Weiner had worked on French Connection and The Exorcist, you know, getting casts together. So he had his little sort of team around him, and these guys were all pretty sort of long in the tooth Hollywood guys, you know, and using actors like Dean Stockwell and those older actors, you know, who are sort of long time Hollywood character actors, you know. So Friedkin, when I spent time with him, what was fascinating was that he's partly in the old Hollywood. You know, he worked with Hitchcock. He was a massive Hitchcock fan, and I think directed one of the Hitchcock.
The last two of the Hitchcock series, The Mystery Hour.
Yeah. And he would, you know, he knew Daryl Zanuck and his producers, and you know, talk about them and stuff. But then he's also part of this new wave of directors, which was like Spielberg and Francis Coppola and those sort of people. You know. So, and somehow, I guess he had his sort of maverick burst with the French Connection, The Exorcist, you know. But then I think things sort of went off the rails a bit with The Sorcerer. But rather than trying to get back on by making a family-friendly movie, he made this.
A real William Friedkin rom-com is kind of an interesting idea, although we do have cruising.
Yeah.
So. Now, what about thematically? Just what the film means to each of you when you watch it. What are your takeaways from it?
Well, I'm pretty proud of it, I have to say. It's wonderful to be so sort of integrally involved in it and to have such a good relationship with someone we respect so highly. I mean, I was already a fan of his before, you know, this whole thing came up. And so to be able to so to be proud of it, to think it's got some, you know, wonderful qualities to it.
And not just holds up today, but still seems ahead of its time in many ways, and especially the music.
Exactly. Well, thank you. And it's the fact that we kind of take some initiative within the whole project. Like, so it wasn't just us. What did I say just? It wasn't merely, you know, doing a score, but we managed to turn it into our next proper sort of album as well. So it sort of covered two things. It was a wonderful bit of Hollywood experience for us with a great man, but also we could sort of it was part of the curve of our sort of mainstream career, if you know what I mean. So
perhaps a point on the curve.
There's a point on the curve. I was going to say that. But yeah, so I think that's something to be proud of. I think, which again sort of helped pave the way for the next stage of our career, which ended up with a sort of very sort of pop-orientated, some huge hits in America, as well as some more left-field stuff on our next record. So yeah, it was. I feel very proud of it.
And you as well, I know. But I'm also curious, just about you as a film viewer and a film connoisseurs, what your thoughts are on the film, especially having seen it a few times. Obviously, having your music in it might change it a little bit, but just about the themes of duplicity, duality, and the nature of good and evil in people. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Rick Masters is an interesting character, I think, and Willem Dafoe playing that character, you know, was a young actor in like really early days for him. I'm not sure if it was his first, certainly his first.
I think his third movie, but the others were kind of unknown. Apparently when Friedkin talked to him, he said, I want to have unknown actors, nobodies, like you. And which is a charming way to reel someone in, please.
Yeah, I mean, with movies, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with movies, and I think one of the problems I have with movies is understanding them, like the plot. You know what I mean? And it's only watching it this time that I really sort of thought, I see, those are guys, kind of the Chinese guys are FBI agents.
It's confusing. No, it's a confusing movie. The first time I watched it as a kid, I was like, well,
I felt a bit like that too.
So what I always took away from it in the initial phases was this, like I say, this impressionistic thing. And I remember going to a film festival in Turin with Bill Friedkin. I got this phone call. I was just at home. I remember distinctly. I was actually bagging up rubbish and stuff. The phone rang, and this lovely Italian lady was on the phone and said, I'm speaking, from the Turin Film Festival. We're going to be doing a big retrospective on William Friedkin's work, and he's asked if you would be interested in writing an essay on the use of music in his films. So I went, yep, I'll do that. So I did that, and yeah, without going into all the details, ended up going to Turin with Bill for this retrospective of all his movies, and it's the first time they showed his interview with Fritz Lang. I don't know if you guys have ever checked that out.
Hands up, who's seen that? His interviews with Fritz Lang.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a low number. Check it out. It's on YouTube, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. Again, Friedkin, he was a massive fan of Fritz Lang. He was a big fan of Harold Pinter as well. Made a movie as a birthday party, but he came and stayed in London with Harold Pinter and Antonio Fraser and sort of moved in those circles. And he was, he's married to Jean Moreau as well for a while. He's like,
and then Sherry Lansing later on, like it's wild.
Yeah,
He's like
business oriented.
Yeah, cinema history zelly, really.
Yeah. So I thoroughly lost the track of what I was.
That's okay. That's what I do.
Yeah,
that's my.
But,
I think it's we're talking about the themes of
that was
good and evil,
so
and also as an artist, Rick Masters is interesting, right? Because he's an artist beyond reproach in the illegal side.
Yeah.
But he hates his
There
own
we
work.
were, so at the Turin Film Festival, and there was, I remember Dario Argento was there, this sort of dinner that we had, and these guys who all worked for, the guy who did he used to do all the Fellini movies of the dubbing of the sound, and he did the dubbing of the sound for the Italian version of The Exorcist, which maybe was really, that's by far the scariest version of The Exorcist. So watching this in Italian.
Because every sound in that, sorry to interrupt, but every sound in that was Foley. There was no natural sound in that.
Yeah. And I remember, anyway, we were talking about To Live and Die in LA at one point, and one of the Italian guys, but Bill, you show us LA like we never ever seen it before. And I think at that time, actually, you didn't see that area of LA, down by the docks and the Union Station and all of that, especially the opening montage, and all of the sort of industrial thing. And LA is this sort of gritty, sort of really horrible place, and the sort of luxury locations, Rick Masters' apartment and stuff, are all stylized. But again, you're not in that sort of like Beverly Hills LA thing, do you mean?
Right.
It's all quite tacky in a way, isn't it, sort of thing. And certainly, Chance's girlfriend's place, So that's one of the things I really take away from it, sort of from the beginning, really. It looks unlike any other film, and Robbie Muller's photography is just so atmospheric, I think, And then back with the music as well. I think it gives quite a sort of heady mix, for a kind of 80s movie, it's quite a heady mix of ingredients.
Rather timeless, I think. Do we have any questions? Yes, right there, please. Oh, here, wait. Look, it's a wireless mic. Oh, you have a mic there. Look at this. The Prince Charles Cinema, they take care of everything.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, Nick. Hi, Jack. The movie is incredible, as always. I have a question and a story. Am I allowed both? Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
You've actually answered one of my questions. My question, you've answered it, but I misheard. The bass synth that you used throughout. May I just get the name of that again, please?
It's called an Oscar.
An Oscar.
Oscar, yeah.
Oscar.
But I mean, I play actual bass. The main line through the City of the Angels track is me actually playing, but there's that other sort of punk sound. That's Oscar.
Yeah. And so I hear some were there any prophets or Jupiters or anything used? You can hear some of on the voices there.
Prophet 5 we use, and Jupiter 8 as well.
Yeah, and we used to use a synth called a PPG Wave, which was a sort of, at the time, a state-of-the-art synth, which mixed early digital synthesis with analog synthesis. Yeah, very cool machine.
What's the incredibly haunting sound of the beginning of City Angels? Can you remember what synth that is? When we see at the end, when she's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be in this for life,"
Yeah.
That same sound appears.
Emulator.
Emulator? Okay.
We couldn't afford Fairlights.
It's got that sort of vocal sound that
Yeah.
we use, the wheel, the sort of bending
Okay,
wheel.
I've always been
bending
with
down.
I think we used like 2 or 3 different, because all of these synths had these quite interesting, the emulator actually had a sampled choir on it, but on PPG Wave had a sort of like a digital imitation of a choir. There was a really great sound actually, and we mixed a bit of that in as well.
Yeah.
You know? So it was a sort of hybrid of stuff.
You could manipulate the sounds, especially on the PPG Wave.
Yeah.
So we could get all sorts of interesting, moving textures. You know, so, yeah.
When you started, did you have another one?
I have
Go for it.
a very quick story. I'll be as brief as I can. My dad, Peter McAvoy, actually was a TV director in Ireland, and he passed away very suddenly and dramatically in October. And he and I were great friends.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks. And he was a big fan of William Friedkin. And one day, in the latter days of his career, he was dispatched very swiftly to London one day to do an interview with a director when the presenter, after a heavy session, didn't turn up. And it turned out when he got there that he was William Friedkin. And he was, this is a dad's story, so there's a point to it. And when he got there, his assistant briefed him and said, don't look him in the eye, don't look at his feet, don't look left, don't look right, don't move, don't blink, just go in, do it and get out. And Dad said, fine, that's what he would do. And about an hour later, he came out, and it was William Friedkin saying to him, Peter, if you're ever in Hollywood, look me up. And he said, I sure will, Bill, absolutely. And the assistant came over to him and said, what the hell did you do in there? Nobody gets to call him Bill. So we wrote this off as a grandiose dad story, particularly a creative dad story. Until fast forward a few years later, and we were watching the remastered Blu-ray version, which is incredible, of the movie. So we watched the movie, and then we watched the special features of the interviews, and you guys come on, and you tell the exact same story. So he was saying, yes, he said, they were only allowed to call him Bill. I was allowed to call him Bill. I am special. That's not me making it up. So I just
Definitely on the inside, if you call it.
yeah. He said he was lovely. So I think it's probably a bit like when you're in school and you hear that you're going to have this awful teacher that hates everybody, and then you're in the class and they love you, and you go, what is everyone talking about?
Was there a moment where you witnessed a phone call in the middle of one of the funniest stories you've ever heard from William Friedkin? Could you relate that?
I'll never forget that. We were in one of the editing rooms at Todd AO, do you remember that? And actually Willem Dafoe was in there, and Friedkin introduced us to Willem Dafoe. And then Friedkin launched into this long elliptical anecdote about something, I forget what it was. And then suddenly someone said, his assistant said, there's a phone call for you, Bill. And then Bill took the phone, and he just screamed at whoever it was on the phone. And just going on and on and on for ages, really upset about something.
It was his future ex-wife's lawyer.
Actually, it turned out to be the head of Technicolor, apparently. But what the amazing thing was, he sort of screaming and then put the phone down and then carried on calmly in exactly the point of the anecdote that the phone call had come in at. I thought that was totally cool.
I think it's the handling of people like that when he does have a problem, because he has to deal with them like that, is what earned him the nickname Hurricane Billy back in the 70s, which kind of stuck. So I think there's people afraid of him, but he seems rather affable.
And he was lovely to us. Yeah, and your dad experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
I think he didn't suffer fools gladly, but if he
Who does?
Who does? Yeah.
I'd also like to say, Peter's such a lovely name. My partner and I just had a son on Halloween, and he's named Peter, so I just want to say thank you. And any other questions? Yes, right there, sir, with the glasses. That doesn't probably help. There's probably another pair of glasses, right? So. Oh, right. Sorry, right there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm half blind. I'm wearing contact lenses, so forgive me.
Hi, Jack. So you have a musical education, unlike a lot of pop musicians, and I'm wondering how important that education was to getting the gig, and also during the gig to completing it. How much did you depend on your education, and how much arranging did you have to do, and so on?
Yes, I always sort of think that I got into this business despite having a musical education. So, but I was aware actually that when we did this project, thinking sort of long form, being able to sort of write things down and it definitely helped. Yeah, it's a lot of the time it doesn't help particularly, and I think when you're in the initial phase of getting ideas and stuff, it's that's not very useful. But certainly in the studio and working on the sort of long form tracks that we were doing, City of the Angels is a sort of 12-minute track or so, and keeping track of all of that it definitely helped being able to write stuff down. Yeah.
Follow on from that, City of Angels, is there multiple versions of that, or the tracks, basically the track you were working on ended up being the one mixed down, heard in the film? Are there alternate versions we could hear sometime?
There are sub-mixes of it, so which are used in different parts
Right,
of the film.
I think the nature of having to work so quickly though meant that there's just sort of like one version of it. We did it in 3 separate sections. You'll hear how it naturally falls into those 3 sections. But there's not like alternate versions of it or anything.
I was curious about that, because I call it the dance track. Is the red stairs at the piano one?
Yeah.
Black, blue,
Yeah,
white.
blue, white.
With no lyrics, I forget the name.
That's like a remix of City of the Angels, isn't it, effectively?
Some of it is.
With lots of spins and different...
Yeah. That's why I was curious if there was more, if there was like essentially 12-inch mixes, sitting in a vault perhaps one day to be on a reissue, deluxe reissue.
No, I think we just did different sections and then Friedkin used them. The only bit of the film where he asked us to be quite specific was, the scene where John Turturro's running in the airport, where he's running away. And I think he wanted us to go back in the studio to do something specifically for that section.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
other than that, it was all just, here we go.
And roughly, what would be the first thing that you did when you went in the morning to work on that stuff? You had a week, so just put the drum machine on, put a setting on. What would be the thing?
Well, as I say, that first day we spent sampling.
Sorry,
percussion.
you did answer that.
So that did come in handy because that sort of massive anvil type sound that he uses quite a lot came out of that. But yeah, I think we were just sort of it's like a whole probably days worth of drum programming and stuff. But I do remember that with the track Wait that closes the album, that we ended up doing with a drum machine and a sort of Fairlight bass, didn't we? It's a sort of like program bass, and it took absolute fucking ever to program that and get it all together. And I listening to this, I know that you play the bass part to City of the Angels in 1 take.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
it's amazing.
It's just like record, just play everything, and it's all in time, beautifully played.
Yeah,
so
it's very impressive.
And it was like done in however long it takes to play through that thing,
Yeah.
And so when Nick talks about spontaneity, that was definitely part of what we were doing. There wasn't that meticulous assembling it all note by note as we had done before.
We worked with a sort of engineer guy called David Motion, who we'd worked with him briefly. We'd done a bit of production by way of complete contrast, with David Van Day, from Dollar. Do you remember that dreadful band? And we'd been asked to produce a track for him. And that's where we met David Motion. We started to work with him. So he was a kind of up and coming producer, sort of aspiring producer, but really was at that stage an engineer. But he had, again, I think he was perfect. He was sort of hungry and sort of, he was thinking in a contemporary way, open-minded, and was sort of up for the whole thing. So it was a really good chemistry between Jack and I and him.
Now, unfortunately, we are out of time, and we have got to go. So we're going to wrap that up kind of unceremoniously, but I'd like everyone to give, not just me, a big warm round of applause for the fabulous Jack Hues and Nick Feldman, Wang Chung.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Should we try once again?
Yeah.
Let's go again.
Right.